Young people are disengaged from democratic processes. Most of them don't participate in elections. They don't usually stand as candidates and remain unrepresented in electoral managerial functions. The IEC is also concerned about the underrepresentation of young people on the voters' roll. For more on this, we are joined by Dr. Thina Nzo, a senior researcher for Public Affairs Research Institute. Thank you so much for your time, Doctor. As a young person, I must say I'm quite concerned about the underrepresentation and the fact that young people are just so disengaged. What do you think is the main reason for this?
Thank you very much for inviting me to your show and to share my thoughts on the topic. Yes, we are dealing with a very dire situation in South Africa where we find that the young people who are actually active participants in our economy, in our state structures, are the ones who are less engaged in processes of democracy. And that really talks to the way in which our political representatives are not able, to draw young people into participating in our democratic processes. I mean, let's look at our statistics. Close to 40% of our population in South Africa is the youth. And what's even more concerning is that 57% of this population remains unemployed. So it means that our country is really not taking into consideration how it can start engaging with this population in order to change the socio-economic landscape that is affecting them through processes of democracy, through processes of policy making. And this talks to our electoral processes as well, which means that our political parties need to start thinking about engaging the youth.
Being on the ground and having heard a lot of the issues and concerns raised by young people, the main issue is that there's just no interest in involving young people, whether it's in job creation, policy, decision-making, for example, here in electoral management bodies. Whose role and responsibility is it to include the youth? Because, as you rightfully say, the youth are the future. If you look at what the stats speak to, why are we not including the people that contribute to our economy?
The youth is found in various platforms. I must specify that. It's found in various platforms where, unfortunately, when it comes to state institutions, when it comes to political representatives, they do not know how to tap into these platforms because of the conservative nature, the way in which our state processes are structured. For example, right now we are in a season of political campaigning and we are in a season of elections. One of the key questions is that why aren't our state institutional representatives, such as political parties and political leaders, not engaging the youth in platforms where the youth are mostly active? And these platforms are the digital platforms. Right now we have an active community of the youth, which are engaging in various matters and various discussions in these digital platforms, especially the social media. But unfortunately, when we look at the way in which our our political parties have been conducting their campaigns, they are still stuck in the old rigid forms of traditional campaigning methods that are not as engaging when it comes to deliberative engagement in democracy. So in other words, when we are looking at the way in which elections are conducted, political parties have not been able to facilitate campaigns in an e-democracy perspective where you get the digital community coming in to engage with political parties and their representatives.
And just speaking about the digital aspect of things, we know that the IEC has come up with this new device system that will that will be able to pick up whether or not people have double voted, but also they've come up with this online registration process. And just looking at how voter registration stations have been looking like over this weekend, it's been extremely empty, and you would hope that people, especially the youth, would take up the opportunity to rather register online and sort out the issues online. But is there a space and an environment for people to actually, especially the youth, to take up the opportunity to move towards a digital space. Because from where we see things, it's almost like we're still stuck on the old rigid way of campaigning, doing elections and involving the youth, even though things have moved into the digital space.
Yeah, what we have been seeing over the weekend is quite concerning indeed. And you have to think about the way in which these elections are being conducted in a space where there's a lot of anxiety and precarity when you look at our socio-economic landscape, especially what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, the way in which our resources were deployed, the way in which resources were distributed in society. The youth have not, benefited quite adequately in that sense. So in other words, there is a lot of disillusionment that has been growing over the past few months, and not to even mention, the kind of issues that we have been talking about, where we look at local government as a sphere that has been very ineffective, a sphere that has not really taken into cognizance the challenges that communities are facing. So as the youth, as you can see in the country, the youth considers themselves as a marginalized group when it comes to the way in which they are being represented. So the kind of delusion that we are seeing, the kind of apathy that we are seeing when it comes to elections most probably contributes to what we have been seeing over the weekend, where the youth has not really been able to aggressively come out and exercise their democratic right. So that could be a contributing factor. But again, you cannot expect to engage the youth only through a single weekend. There is a process that was supposed to be built up even before we came to the election period. And that's where I think that the political parties have missed that, that boat of actually conducting voter education, engaging the youth on local issues, and also engaging the youth on their democratic rights when it comes to choosing their preferred candidates in their communities. So it's something that has been long coming, and obviously one thing we can really be certain about is that disillusion has contributed towards the low voter registration amongst the youth.
Great. Thanks so much for your insight. We really do appreciate it. That's Dr. Thina Nzo from the Senior Research for Political Affairs Research Institute.